Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Outside the Box with my good friend, Jamie Winship. How many times have you been on the podcast now?
I think this is 4.
This is number 4.
Number 4.
So what we're going to do you guys a favor just right at the beginning. We're going to link up the first 3 conversations we had. Yeah, 3, right?
Yes.
3, this is 4.
Yeah.
So the first 3 will be in our description below if you want to do a deep dive on some of the topics that Jamie and I have been talking about. And we're going to go outside the box today, Jamie.
Yeah, good.
With a very common topic, common word, and that's anxiety. So let's start off by just, what do you think is anxiety? Give me like your definition of anxiety.
Well, I mean, anxiety, simply put, to me is fear. Like I'm fierce. Something's producing anxiety in me. It's producing fear in me. And so I would, I use different words. It's anxiety, it's stress, but ultimately it's causing me to be fearful, whatever that is.
Why do you think it's such a common word that we hear? Because I feel like it's even common for me to say, I'm anxious about something.
Right.
It's becoming mainstream, and I feel like it's something we talk about with kids as they are young, and I never heard it growing up.
Yeah, right, exactly.
And now that I'm aware of the word, I feel like I'm more anxious.
Yeah.
What are you saying? What's your thoughts on that?
No, I think that's really true. So if you think of, if we did the root study, the etymology of the word to be anxious, I think you'll find like in all language in its most original form is actually sacred, aimed at the sacred. So like if you go back into ancient Hebrew or ancient Arabic or Aramaic, all these languages, they originate as ways to communicate with the sacred. That's what language is originally for.
So language is to communicate with the sacred.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And then you watch as language evolves, it becomes more secularized. It's a super fascinating study. It's on a different topic, but that's why when we're using these words, like, so for example, Mao in China, when he wanted to change the thinking of the entire population of China, he just would remove words from the dictionary, from their vocabulary, and over one generation, those words were gone and the ideas were gone. So you could go into China and use a term like God or faith. They don't know the concept anymore. It's gone. I think it takes 2 generations for it to be completely gone. So even if I show them in Chinese the symbol or the word faith or church or God, they don't know what it means.
That's very fascinating because I think there's I've definitely heard the saying of if you want to take control of a population, take control of the media first.
That's right. Yes.
And because if you can control the narrative,
right,
you control everything.
That's right.
And it seems like, that's kind of being done. It's being done all the time. It's always been done.
Yes. That's
so,
right.
So how do we protect ourselves from that? Going back to like the etymology of it, do you have to figure out where these words came from?
Well, I mean, it's important to have the right definitions of things, and that's a problem in education and all sorts of things. But so just to take the word anxious, so anxious can mean to be excited about something, right?
There you go.
Right? I'm anxious to get there. That's a very beautiful word. I'm anxious to know the sacred. I have this deep longing, and my fear is that I'm going to miss something great. It's a beautiful fear.
So fascinating how you can flip that, because I've also heard the analogy of when you're feeling anxious, it's the same feeling you feel when you're riding a roller coaster.
Yeah.
But when you're riding a roller coaster, it's like fun.
Yes.
But when you're not, it's terrifying.
Yes.
And the same thing goes with working out.
Right.
If you put yourself through a vigorous workout and you're sweating and your heart rate's up, that's normal. But when you're not working out, you're like, oh crap, what's happening?
Yes. Right.
So the feelings are not the bad thing.
Right.
It's the interpretation.
Right. And it's a corrupted version of the right emotion, the right feeling. So if I say, one of my favorite actors when I was growing up was Al Pacino. So, for example, if someone said, because he did the movie Serpico, which I loved That's why I became a cop. And so, but if someone said, hey, we're going to go meet Al Pacino, I would feel very anxious about that. I would be so like, oh my gosh, Al Pacino. But I'm not afraid of him, right? I don't have fear of him. I'm anxious because I'm in awe of this person or what's going to happen. And so, as you're saying, everything inside of my body physically is like geared up, psyched up for this thing. It's very beautiful. But if I was afraid of him, I wouldn't want to meet him. But I'm anxious to meet him. So we're using the wrong word, I think, when we use the word anxiety to mean I'm stressed out.
Yeah. When I think of, I'm anxious to do something, I think positive.
Yeah.
But when I think about having anxiety towards something, I feel like that's a negative.
Yes. And I think that's a wrong narrative. That word has been taken to mean something different. So I have a friend that's working as a lunch monitor in an public elementary school, and she was telling me the other day she was talking to a second grader who had been absent for a few days, and she said to this, hey, it's good to see you, because she wants them to feel seen. And she says, were you sick? And he said, no, I had an anxiety attack. Second grader. And I needed to take a break to deal with my anxiety. Well, where did this kid learn this language, right? Someone taught him. That's an anxiety attack. That's what you're having. And so now he knows to compensate for this new thought of anxiety, which really is probably fear, something fearful in him.
Yeah. When I think of just my own experiences and, people that I know, it seems to me that anxiety, in the way that most people understand anxiety, and anxiety attacks come later on in life, when things don't go the way they thought they were going to go. But as a kid, it seems like you don't know to have an anxiety attack.
Right. And so, I think of like being a little kid on Christmas Eve and waiting for Santa Claus. You're filled with, you're anxious.
Yeah.
But you're not afraid. But it's this very powerful, beautiful, like, we don't want to miss this. Like, whatever it takes, we don't want to miss this. So imagine going through life with that kind of anxiousness.
Yeah.
I'm so anxious to write this book. I'm not afraid of it. It doesn't keep me up at night, but it needs to happen. And the motivator behind this kind of anxiousness is joy. It's a joyful thing. And so the joy, I was talking to a bunch of high schoolers earlier today, and I was talking about why go through all the work of writing a novel or a play. It's for the joy that comes at the end of the process. It makes the work worth it. And we're anxious to see what happens with this finished project.
Yeah, I kind of relate that to, athletics, as we often do. You're supposed to feel a little bit of nervous energy
the butterflies, yes.
Before a match or a game. And, I think if a coach were to say that that's an okay thing to feel, you're like, okay, now this is my body getting ready to go.
Right.
It's kind of coming from that joyful place.
Yes.
We can do that in our everyday lives as well.
That's right.
It's really interesting. So I want to go back to as we get older, and things aren't happening the way we think they should. That brings on a sense of nervousness, anxiety, in the sense that I'm on the wrong path, and I kind of think of it as the fear that we talked about in a previous conversation about like being left alone, or it's like an existential thing.
Right.
So
absolutely.
How do you reframe that, as, people are entering adulthood, whether that's going to college or, going through a life event, later on in life that can be like cause an existential crisis inside. How do we reframe that?
But again, by kind of what we've talked about before is understanding the truth of what's happening. That's really, it's we're working on this other series, and someone asked me, well, what's the value of reading what you wrote? And I said, the value is because it's about what's true. The value of what's true is truth always produces freedom. Knowing what's true always allows for freedom. Believing what's not true produces conflict and really a kind of imprisonment.
So when you say that, I hear, okay, well, how do I know what's true and what's not?
Yeah.
You know, and,
Yes.
and we've spoken about truth always comes in love or from a place of love.
It's sourced in love, yes.
But facts
yes,
can
but fact-
often not be interpreted that way.
That's right.
So how
Yeah.
do we look
Okay,
at that?
so good, and I know this is what we were kind of trying to get to. So, let's say I experience a specific event. So I wake up and I'm going about my day, and I experience these things happen to me or in what I'm doing, and they produce in me a sense of the belief, okay, something's really wrong here, and I am actually in danger.
Yep.
That's what I feel.
Yep.
Now, I would not say that because I'm not in perhaps any physical danger, but my belief is I'm now threatened by what's happening.
And this is very common. I felt this way, and I wouldn't have felt different if, and this is a very common analogy. If there was a tiger right in front of me, I would feel the exact same way.
It's the exact same feeling. Yeah. And so I'm telling my body, I'm telling myself that I'm in a situation that has very serious threat to it.
Okay.
And so my whole body's responding to the idea we're under attack.
Which the body's supposed to do.
Yes.
That's what we're designed to do.
And so it prepares for war.
Right.
Right, and so the whole system is preparing for we're going to suffer major injury in what's happening, and it's interesting. So if I'm not controlling the way I think about things, my amygdala will just see the situation, it'll perceive threat, and we go on red alert. Unless I change that thinking, we stay on red alert. And for many people, they haven't practiced the discipline of going, wait a second now. Am I thinking about this in the way that's true?
Well, and what I often, because that is exactly right. What I find to be a problem is I think we as a whole, myself included, we're so quick to label it an anxiety attack,
yes.
a panic attack,
right.
or whatever, and then it becomes normalized, and then it's like we don't get to the root of the problem, which
right.
is the interpreting the truth.
Right.
We do that later, and then it's like, yeah, I had an anxiety attack or I had a panic attack, and it's a normal part, but you can continue to have those,
right.
and know that it's okay, but haven't exactly gotten to the root of anxiety.
Right.
Does that speak to you at all? How do we get better at, you said the discipline,
right.
the discipline of interpretation, because you want it to be quick.
Yes.
But I think maybe at the beginning it's going to be slow, and you're going to have to kind
right. And this as a tennis player, you practice, you learn how to serve, and it's slow and cumbersome. Everything in life, everything in the reality that we're in that you're beginning to learn is slow and awkward and cumbersome, and you make mistakes. One of the things that produces anxiety in humans is not telling the truth about that. It's like, no, you got to get this right, right away. You have to get this perfect right away and quick. Instead of the truth is, this process takes time, and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and it's okay. That doesn't produce anxiety. That's no. But I am anxious to learn it.
There
right?
we go. There we go.
I'm anxious to do it right. So I'm going to work hard and I'm going to try hard, but I'm not afraid of getting it wrong. That's anxiety.
That's so interesting, because you can almost change it to the where you get anxious to learn how to do this, and then flip the meaning of anxiousness or anxiety in your own brain.
Right.
And then, that might speed up the process if you need it to.
Yes.
But, it still seems that in order to go through that discipline process, we have to figure out how to interpret what's happening.
That's right.
You lay the facts down.
Yes.
You realize, okay, I'm not in danger.
Yes. Right.
How can you flip it from the same way you flipped anxiousness?
Yes.
Anxiousness in the sense of being excited. I can't wait to do this interview with Jamie, and that's anxious.
Right.
The
beautiful kind of anxious. Yeah. So same thing. Like the beautiful thing about all these things we're discussing is what we're actually talking about is reality and true, and the anxiety is actually not true. The capacity and the goal of humans to be anxious and excited about things and want to do things well and try hard is what is true. And to be afraid of things and self-protect and self-promote is actually not human. It's counterproductive.
Can you explain that a little bit? So,
Okay.
Because I feel like it's normal to be afraid of things, but you're saying like that's not human.
The fear part is very human, but to stay in states of fear constantly and anxiety is not what humans were made to do. It's why we have so much disease, is because we live in constant anxiety. We live in constant regular fear. Instead of using fear as it's supposed to be used as a warning device, addressing what it's warning us about, and then fear's done. And so we don't lay in bed at night trying to go to sleep because we're so anxiety ridden. So that's what I mean. So let me just give you an example.
Going, yeah.
So a real example, a true example. So one of my friends is an elected official. And so as an elected official, this person has to answer to a board who elected them in their position. This is common in a lot of companies. You have a director and you have a board, and the board rotates, so the board can elect this person to be the board chair, the board director. But the board rotates, and so the people that put him in that position rotate. And so maybe after 1 year, only 3 of those people are still there that put him in that position, and 2 are new that don't like him. Right?
Yeah.
So this is the way boards can work. And so then the chairman of the board has to constantly be paying attention to what do the board members want and what do they feel. So this board chair in his position, they're going to have an outside audit of what they're doing. That's fine. That's normal. But he discovers in the outside audit that 1 or 2 of his board members are out for blood in him. And so they're telling the auditor all these things. He doesn't know what they're telling him. He just gets notified, hey, we just want you to know that while we're doing this audit, 2 of the board members are not only out to take you out of your position, they're out to personally ruin you. We just want you to know. And they've built a consensus among people that the board oversees to ruin you. That's what he's told. So he goes in on Monday morning. He knows the audit's going on. It's a normal process of their company. It's what they do. But he has no idea this is happening until one of the auditors says, hey, we're not hiding it. We want you to know, like, this is what we're running into as we survey all your people and everything. And then he finds out that some of the ones that are really out to ruin him are his closest confidants in the company.
Oh, so he's completely thrown off. Like, okay, I'm with you.
Has no warning whatsoever. He feels like everything's going pretty well over a couple of years. And so in one hour session, his entire career future is in jeopardy. And not just in jeopardy, but like if this audit comes back with all of these allegations and everything, I will not work again.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So it's not like I might lose my position. I'll go to another company. It's like, no, if I lose my position this way, no one will touch me.
Yep.
So that produces in him anxiety.
Well, then he's probably thinking, well, I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be underneath the bridge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he's worked his whole life to get to this position that he's in, And so, so now the question is like, are those facts true? Yes. That is in fact what is happening. And so there's no debate over that. Are these board members after you? Yes. Are they building a consensus to ruin you? Yes. Are some of your own close confidants in this process to take you down? Yes, all fact. Okay, right?
I'm trying to figure out why he shouldn't panic.
So he's and his feelings are hurt.
Yep.
Because wow, I thought they were my friends. So think of all the conclusions he's coming to in his mind. There are no conclusions yet, but you start drawing them. Wow, I know where this is going. The truth is, you don't know where this is going. You think you know where it's going, but you actually don't know where it's going. But as far as he's concerned, this is going this way. I'm ruined. So he calls his wife and he tells her this is what happened. And she's not only horrified, she's not even in the scenario. When you tell a person that's directly involved with this, that's directly impacted by a scenario that they have no involvement in, they're even more powerless to do anything about it. But she realizes if you're ruined, we're ruined, and at least you can talk to the auditors and all that. I'm going to lay awake at night and think of how this is going to be a disaster. So when he gives the burden of what he's going through to her,
yep,
she really cannot bear it. She really has, all she can do is worry, right?
And her reaction, I'm sure, is making his feeling worse.
Yes, right? So the anxiety is like cancer. Like
Yep.
he receives it and then he passes it on to someone that really can't do anything about it. And then whoever, whether it's family members or whatever. So what can the person do? This situation's going to go the way it's going to go.
Meaning
right?
the facts are
Whatever,
the facts.
Yeah, they're going to happen. He
Right.
has actually no control over this. What he does have control over is his own fear, though, and his own response to what is happening.
So
right?
how does he exercise that control?
So here's what he does. So he, first of all, he takes his fear captive. You grab hold of it and you identify it. This is he's got to tell the truth. Okay, I'm afraid. Yes, absolutely true. Okay, what am I afraid of? What is producing the fear in me that they're saying all these bad things? Actually, no. What I'm afraid of is that I am ruined. That I'm going to be ruined. Ruined is a very dramatic, permanent word.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not like I'm going to lose this job. No, that's not. I'm going to be ruined. And that's the word that's in his head. And his wife now is also going to be ruined. He says to her, I am ruined. What she hears is, we are ruined.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm finished.
Yeah, done.
Yeah.
Completely done. So first of all, he has to be able to say, okay, what is my deepest belief right now that's producing the fear in me? My deepest belief is that I'm going to end up unemployed for the rest of my life.
Okay.
There it is. That's just he's just going to say that out. But then, and so that's true. Okay, that's his belief. But so the next thing he needs community to walk with him through it. If he's by himself, you can't talk yourself out of this kind of fear. And now him and his wife are both in it, so they're just reaffirming the fear between themselves. You need a community that can look at the facts without fear and help you think about, is what you're fearing really true or false? Right.
Because I'm assuming that that's never true. Would be the deepest belief of I'm ruined, or I'm never going to be employed again.
That's right.
It's most likely not
true.
Right.
But if I said that to him, he's like, you don't know, right? Because he is ruined. So so this is how he worked through the process. So he calls me and he says, just because I happen to be one of his friends, that's the only reason, and we're close friends. And he says, "Hey, can I talk to you? I want to tell you what's going on." So instead of getting isolated, because fear uncontrolled will separate you and isolate you. And you'll self-protect and self-promote, So instead of doing that, he out of just sheer discipline, I'm going to get with another person that's not involved in this and tell them the truth about what I believe about these facts.
Okay.
That's a very important strategy. So he calls me, he goes, "I want to tell you what's going on." So he calls me and he tells me, and so I say, I understand. Okay, I understand. What are you? Tell me what you're afraid of. And he said, "I'm afraid that I'm ruined." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he goes, "That I'll never work again." And I said, "Okay, I'm listening to his fear." And now what I want to walk him through is, what's the truth though? This is really happening, but what this process does not own your future. It can only own your future if you let it own your future. It may take your job away, but really, come on. That's what I was saying to him. Come on. You lose this job. Are you telling me there's no other jobs in the world? Like bringing them back to what's true. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of, I've heard you talk a lot about going up in the creative.
Yes.
And then bringing that down into the practical.
And that's what I want to do with him.
Okay.
And he knows that's what I'm going to do. That's what friends do.
Okay.
So I say, okay, let's get together. Like we pick a night, like pretty quick. Let you and your wife, bring your wife, come over. Let's be together in a community. Let's get together in a community and let's walk through, not this, your fear. Let's walk through your fear. Let's get back into the truth of who you really are, and then let's look at the situation from that perspective. Like, we're not going to change this. We're just going to change the way we look at this.
And changing the way you look at that scenario changes the way you feel about it. And then all of a sudden, you can change it into that anxious, good feeling.
Yes, right. And I don't even know how to describe this or explain it fully, but there is this. So like if I'm looking at a situation from a perspective of self-protection and self-promotion,
Yep.
It brings negative energy to the situation. There's the situation, like the board people who are after him are bringing the very negative emotion and energy to the scenario, and it makes what's going to come out of the scenario negative. But if I come at the same scenario, the same facts, with truth and a positive view of who I am and compassion towards these people, it can turn the situation itself.
It makes so much sense. And when I'm listening, I get the feeling that was a very extreme case.
Yeah.
I feel like the not as extreme case can be even more detrimental for people because you might not get to the place where you make the phone call
right
to Jamie or to your best friend.
Yeah.
And then I think that's when we get in these constant circles of anxiety.
Yes, good point.
It's a little less severe than like having a panic attack but it's a constant state of anxiety.
Yes.
Which leads to a constant state of self-protection and self-promotion.
Right. Which is what produces board members that want to ruin you. That's exactly right. So imagine if we were just teaching this process. You're exactly right. It's not like you go to the big tennis tournament and try and play well. You learn to play well all the time.
Yeah.
In smaller situations and get to the. So imagine if we're teaching, instead of a second grader saying I had to take 2 days off of school because I'm dealing with anxiety, someone told him that. The way you deal with anxiety is you drop out and then you go over here and then you come back if you can.
You go up to your room. and pout. Do whatever you do in your room.
Yep.
Play video games, get distracted. And I think that's a real problem because the temptation is to find a distraction.
Yep.
not deal with it.
Right.
And then it becomes that circle.
Yes.
And then the kid is, or the adult is, taken off work for a week.
That's right.
Mental
health days.
Mental health days.
That's where that kid learned this.
That's so
My mom
fascinating.
or dad takes a mental health week or whatever. And so what it's doing is legitimizing the fear as that's okay to feel that way and disengage like that. That's okay. And instead of saying to the second grader, what are you afraid of? Like, let's figure out how to deal with that fear while you're in school. So you don't have to go way over here somewhere. Yeah, so you're just learning young how to deal with it instead of being told young, this is natural to be afraid, just learn to cope with it. And if you can't, we'll give you medication or whatever. Like Just all these ways just to avoid the whole thing. So let me finish this scenario.
Please.
So that person, so he calls me and I say, come over. I haven't known this guy that long. And so he told me, he said, typically when this kind of thing happens to me, I don't even talk to my wife. I just go home and shut myself in the man cave and just simmer.
Right.
Like that. And he said, I'm not used to coming and being with another person to walk through this openly. And I said, well, this is going to be a different practice. So it took courage for him to come with his wife and sit with us and walk through what's happening. It's like, put it out there, get it out there. Don't keep it in here. Put it out here, because when you take a fear and hold it into the light, it gets smaller.
I love that.
But when you're in your room at night, it gets bigger.
Yeah.
Just like monsters under the bed.
And I think part of the problem is that often we're not aware enough to know that the fear exists, and then there's like this unidentified monster growing.
Yep.
And you don't know what to do when it comes out,
right.
And then you're like scared to death.
Yeah, that's right.
What's your thought? You mentioned mental health. Like, what role does this play in this movement? I feel like we're in of taking care of your mental health. You said something interesting to me the other day around work, and a good friend of ours, Gina, had asked you, do you feel what was the word? Do you feel restful?
Yeah, restful.
Yeah.
And
being in rest, as you work a lot, obviously, like the environment we're in right now, where we're so aware of like mental health, and we're trying to, take care of people that way. What's some alternatives? Is it just what we're talking about?
Yeah,
like addressing the fear,
right.
addressing, or I guess just identifying it.
Right. A discipline that keeps me reminding my body that we're not at war. A discipline. Like, hey, we're not at war. Relax, heart. We're not at war. Relax, brain. We're not at war. So instead of my brain driving me, I think my brain is the saying. Don't let your brain think you. You think your brain. Your brain's going to say, we're in trouble. It's like it's what it's trained to do, is to protect. And I'm taking control of my brain going, listen, there is no danger here. Actually, it's okay. And so with my friend, and I think you can only do this by truth telling, and you can only do it in community. I've never met a person that can do it by themselves. Yeah. And so with my friend, so he needs to come to a place of rest internally, and then think about what's happening. But if he thinks about it in a state of anxiety, and this is what this was his next step, is I might as well just resign. Quit. Mm-hmm. No. Why? No, that's a horrible decision. It may be that this board decides to let you go or fire you. That's okay. You'll be okay. But don't you quit. Because then this is just all ugly and bitter and nasty. Like, let's redeem this thing. So don't quit. First, let's get to a place of rest and calm, and the true you thinking, not the like they hate me, I'm no good. And I asked him, I said, if they ruin you, if that happens, what's so bad about that? And he said, the shame. Boom, there it is. He feels shame.
Interesting.
So the shame will color the way he thinks about everything. And a person living in shame is a disaster waiting to happen, because the shame will dominate how they think. And so what we have to do is get rid of the shame so that the true him, the real him, can look at the scenario and go, okay, what do we do now? At rest. So to do that, so he just sat with us, him and his wife, and his wife had a panic attack while we were sitting there.
Is this as you're getting to rest?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is like
Okay.
You're letting all of it bubble out, you
Yep.
know, like get it out, let's go. And she had a panic attack. And so Donna just was walking her through. It's like, okay, let it go. Let's talk about what is it? What do you feel? Like, don't bury it. Don't suppress it. Like, let's go, let it out. And so she walked through it, and I was walking through it with her husband, and he said the shame. And I said, okay, these guys can't give you shame. The shame has to already be there. You're giving yourself the shame. You're the only one that can make yourself feel ashamed. Nobody else can do it. You're ashamed. Let's walk through getting rid of the shame. And so we just walk through that process of just let the shame go, and we're going to let it go. Okay, you know, and let the false you go. You're not a disappointment. Like you're not, okay, let's let all that go. Okay, now thinking in terms of love and unconditional love, who really are you? And he and I have done this before, and he knows. And so he says the truth of who he is. And I said, okay, now, okay, beautiful. Now that you, this one, the real one, the not afraid one. Let's talk about the future. Forget this right now. What's in the future for you? What does love have for you in the future? And it was really fascinating. He goes, I just see myself like working internationally. And I'm like, okay, wait, stop. Internationally is bigger than what you do now. That means you would not be in what you do now. You'd be international. Like, do you get that? And he goes, oh yeah. I said, so you being afraid of losing this is like holding on to a little thing when what you really want is to let go of that thing and go to a bigger thing. Is that true? And he goes, yeah. And I said, well, why are you afraid to lose this then? And he's like, I don't know. Because he felt like this would make him ashamed.
So I'm stuck on the shame,
Mm-hmm.
you know, because I think that's everybody can. I think a lot of us can.
Right.
We can boil things down to that. How do you get rid of that?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is some strategies, you know, within community to? I think first it's probably like the monster that.
Right.
If it's just out there, it's like, okay, well, that's not that bad.
Right.
You know, is there any other things that, you know, if we can boil down our anxiety or, you know, our fear to shame,
Mm-hmm.
which is so fast. It's just fascinating how we got from, you know, people being against us to shame.
Right.
To like,
Right.
you know, I get the ruined part because, you know, we often think that people can ruin us.
Mm-hmm.
But often it's just because we think if something were to be exposed,
Right.
that, you know, we wouldn't be able to handle
Right.
the shame,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
of other people knowing something,
Yeah.
you know?
So when he said shame, I said, let me ask you a question. I said, is there anything that's going to be revealed in the audit that would legitimately produce shame in you? Like, is there something I don't know about you or that the public doesn't know about you that's going to be revealed publicly in the audit? Because that would be something we would need to talk about.
Sure.
And he's like, no. And I said, okay, so even if the public reads the audit, which most of the time the public's allowed to read them, there'd be nothing in there that would be like, oh, you're a axe murderer.
Right.
No, it's just going to be that I'm not a good leader. And I said, okay, so that means the shame is already present in you. It's not going to come from this.
Right.
Which is usually with shame. So shame is an identity, right? Shame is an identity. So guilt is a feeling I have for doing something wrong. Shame is something I believe to be true about myself.
So shame has nothing to do with messing up in some, you know, big way. It's something that's already there. It's an identity.
Right.
Okay.
So like
Got
I
it.
might do something that makes me feel guilty and I keep it secret, which turns to shame. But shame is like, guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is something's wrong with me. Guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is there's something wrong with me.
Interesting.
Deadly belief. And a lot of people live with shame all the time. So kind of as we talked about before, so where did you learn? Who told you that you should be ashamed of who you are? Where did you learn that? So now we want to find the place where they took on the identity of shame so that we can get rid of that, because the shame will get triggered in different scenarios if you don't deal with it.
That's so fascinating how it could be brought out in me for different reasons that it might be brought out than a friend of mine. In the sense like
yes, exactly.
We're vulnerable in different ways.
Exactly. Right.
Super fascinating. Because
right.
like maybe if a board member doesn't like me, I'm not triggered, and that doesn't bring out shame in me. But if somebody, I think this is real for me, like if somebody were to think that I said something bad about them, like it would bring up something in me,
right,
where it wouldn't bother the other person at all.
And I'm the same way. If someone said, we don't think you're a good leader, that probably wouldn't bother me too much. But if they said, we think you're a liar, that might really produce shame in me, because maybe that's something from my past that I've like been accused of or something. Yeah, you never know in a person what is going to trigger that shame in them. And so whatever it is you want to get, so when you want to get to it. And so with him, I was just like, what's the shame? That I failed my family, right? That I'm not a good provider.
Now, could you have that shame? Because, you learn shame way early before you have a family, before you have a job.
Yep.
Is that shame just attaching itself to like provision and family?
That's right. It's how you inherit the shame. So it's how you inherit the shame from whoever is giving it to, offering it to you, and you take it. So if you grow up in a family where the constant thing is like a real man or a real woman does this, and you're unable to ever really do that, it makes you feel like something's wrong with you. So it could be the parent or whoever the influencers in the family is like in my family, it's like a real man would not cry. A real man would stand and fight no matter what's happening. A real man would never walk away. So for my dad, if we came home from school and said, hey, we got in a fight at school, got expelled, he'd be like, okay, that's fine, that's okay. Or, hey, Dad, some guy, called me a name and I walked away. He'd be horrified.
Right.
Like, what? And so we would be ashamed that we didn't fight, even though fighting is probably the dumbest thing you could do, right? So it just depends the environment you grow up in and what in your culture is something that's considered shameful. Okay, and it could be anything in a person when you're talking to humans, like that they've been taught or learned or somehow perceived that like I'm ashamed because I can't. And so that's why when you're talking to people, you have to be super careful with them. That like, oh, that's stupid. Why are you worried about that? It's like very deeply shameful to them.
Yeah, because a lot of this stuff changes the way, as I've gotten to know you, it changes the way you feel about other people and the way they respond to things, because you don't know, you don't necessarily know what that fear is for them.
That's right, exactly.
But
it makes you merciful towards people.
Yeah, I want to. We have to wrap up here pretty soon, but I want to touch on one other topic in loss and like traumatic events that could bring on anxiety. The traumatic event, and trauma can be, the trauma could be with this board member.
Yeah.
Is it all kind of the same, or are there different levels of trauma and loss?
Yeah, so trauma and loss is relative to the person. It's like whatever, it's kind of like shame. It's like whatever is traumatic to a person is what's traumatic to them. So like I was with a bunch of high school kids today, and we were talking about shame and trauma, and we did it with middle schoolers yesterday. But when I say, tell me something traumatic that's happened in your life, some of them will say, can say some very horrible things that have happened to them.
Yeah.
And it's traumatic, and they get emotional about it. And then the next kid will say, yeah, I remember the day my dad said that that I came home too late, and everyone else's room's like, what? Tell us the trauma. That was the trauma, and it's just as emotional to him. It's like, no, man, he hated me. All he said was you were home late. So again, you don't want to judge people's trauma levels, which we do all the time. And so a person stands up and they like have this real traumatic testimonial, and then people with trauma that's not that traumatic feel like their trauma is unimportant. And something's wrong with them because their trauma is not real trauma. And why is it bothering so much? And that person, was sold into human trafficking and they're happy now. I'm just not good at my job and I'm miserable. And again, it just feeds that shame.
Right.
I'm ashamed that I feel so traumatized by something that wasn't real trauma. Yeah. It's constant in humans. This is like this constant comparison. So again, just back to my friend. So like to me, the situation, I kept saying to him, look, if there's nothing in that audit that's secretive, that you don't want anyone to know that's going to get revealed, this isn't that big of a deal. But it doesn't matter that I think that.
Right.
To him, it's horrifying. And so the trauma, the shame to him as he was raised is that a real man provides for his family and he's successful like this. And this was going to be the end of all of that. And the fear is exacerbating it, It's like, and then your dad is going to be ashamed of you, and your kid, he was in tears of how his kids were going to think about him after losing this position.
But it's so normal.
Yeah.
Like you're describing it, and I'm like, man, I can think of 10 different scenarios where I think that's a normal reaction.
It is.
You see it in movies, and I think we as consumers live in fear of like those moments.
Right.
Like we see it happening and we're like, gosh, I don't want to go through that.
Right.
And then you have anxiety about not wanting to go through that.
Right.
And
so again, we're not denying the facts. That would be just insane. So we're just walking back down to the truth. Okay, so let's get rid of the shame. So let's just take that shame and give it away. You know how we've talked about this. Like imagine that unconditional love is sitting with you, and give the shame to love. What does love do with the shame? Like that, I've done that with him before, so he kind of knows that process. And we do that. And I said, okay, now, what is the truth of who you are? What's your true identity? And he says it. His true identity is like innovator, like a lion innovator, like an aggressive, powerful innovator. And I said, okay, all right, good. The shameful disappointment to your family, when he looks at this, he wants to just basically die. We're not. That's not who's looking at this. The innovator lion is looking at this. What does the innovator lion see?
I love that.
And boy, does the innovator lion see this is different. It's completely different. And again, he has that vision in his mind. It's like the innovator lion is like, this is just a process of getting to international level. And I said, okay, beautiful. Okay, so how would the lion innovator feel towards a board member that's obviously struggling with some kind of fear at you because they're after you, because they're fearful? How do you look at that board member? And he goes, well, it's kind of sad, isn't it? Yes, I feel sorry for that guy. Right. So now the whole thing's switching. He's not my enemy. Well, that's a broken board member that's fighting for position and for whatever reason and trying to avoid shame. Right. What about the other board member? Same thing. Right. So what do you expect them to do? And he goes, oh my gosh, he goes, I need to just be their friends. Maybe they need this. Maybe I need to move on for their good, to help them. I'm like, wow, this is a different perspective, right? So he starts, and his wife calms down, doing the same thing with her. And then he says, okay, he's come to rest, right? His anxiety levels dropped. And I said, now tell me what you've done differently in this time than you would have done before. He goes, I stayed in community. I truth told about my fear. I walked through my fear with someone I trust, and I'm back to thinking about this as I really am. And it's okay. Whatever happens is okay. Great. So what about the friends, your confidants that betrayed you? Yeah, they're fearful. We're all fighting for position, and they're fearful, and they felt like this these board people were going to win, and so they just sided with whoever's going to win to protect themselves. I said, do you understand that? Yes. Okay. Well, what are you going to do with them? I'm going to still confide in them. And I'm just going to be cautious, and I'm going to try and forgive them. Beautiful. So the idea was that the thing was going to be made public. So 2 days later, he emails me and he goes, I want you to I got the full report. And he sends it to me. This is 2 days after we've calmed way down. It's going to be okay. Maybe if I lose my position, I'll move to another country and be an innovator internationally, like what's really my dream. This is really actually a small situation. Right. Yeah. So he just lets it go. As soon as he lets it go, the whole atmosphere of the thing changes. And he sends me the actual report. It's a 56-page internal audit report. And I read the whole thing. Everything about him in particular, is beautiful, is positive. There's one page of a very harsh critique in the audit, and it's against the one board member. That's it, page 46. And I take a picture of the page, and I text it back to him, and I said, I see one critique in this whole audit, and it's of the broken guy on your board. And so that happened, and I said, so if this is made public by this guy that wants to have it made public, it only indicts him. So you think, well, he's probably not going to want. So, okay, so that was fine. They were like, okay, oh my gosh, I was ready to quit. I know. Because the fear is driving you, the anxiety is driving you, you're self-protected. Okay, now the real you, okay? And then, not only that, he's driving to speak at this thing, and he calls me and he goes, you'll never guess who called me. And I'm like, I don't know. And he tells me this person, this super high-level person, and he goes, guess why they called me? They wanted to know if I want a job. The next day, another person calls him from another company, offering him a job. They have no idea what's going on here, whatever he's doing. They're just completely outside. And both of them called him to offer him jobs, which far exceed what he's doing now. Now, if he would have quit this, those opportunities would not have come.
Wow. It just, to me, it shows the power of, in any situation, getting back to your identity.
That's right.
And being able to approach it from your identity.
That's right.
It's such a beautiful thing. That's a crazy story.
And in community, this just happened a couple weeks ago. In community. So we need to be not isolated and fearful and by ourselves. We need to be in community with people that love us and that want the truth for us, the best for us, with no agenda. And that's not hard. That's not easy to find friends like that. But that's the kind of community we need.
When you say community, in my head I'm saying it's got to be 10, 15 people. What can community be?
2 or 3.
2 or 3.
Yeah.
2 or 3 people that love you and that are unbiased, and you could just...
Right, and that understand the true you, who the true you is. So they can always be calling forth the true you when you hit, and all of us do, when we hit dark times, rocky times, things that just totally blindside us, and life does. It just blindsides you and knocks you down. The thing is, don't isolate. Don't go inward. Don't go to substances or anything. Get right back in community and just pour your heart out in the safe community. Let them listen to you, and then just start asking you questions to help you get back to the truth of who you are before you make any decisions.
Unbelievable. Before we end, will you talk about Identity Exchange just real quick? Tell us where to find it. What is it about? Because it seems like it always goes back to identity.
Yeah, so that's our company and our website, identityexchange.com, and this is what we do. This is I get to do this every day with people. Just walk them through the false things they believe about themselves or other people or the world that they're in, and exchange it for the truth of who they are, grounded and sourced in love. And I actually have a book coming out in June called...
I cannot wait for this. And I wanted to ask, but I wasn't sure if you were ready. I'm just so pumped about this. Tell us about it.
It's called Living Fearless.
Okay.
Living Fearless, and that's what it's about. It's what's the process to walk through, just in daily life, that allows us to live a life that's fearless. Not brave, but less fearful, fearless. And slowly those fears become less dominating in our life. And there are disciplines and practices just to walk through. And I just tell a zillion stories about places, in the police department and in the government and places where I've lived in the world, where I've just watched people or walked people through this process. And I think the readers will really love it. It's something that they can do while they're reading. It's just like, you need to think like this. These are things you need to ask yourself, like just simple processes and questions.
And that comes out in June?
June.
I for one cannot wait. And guys, believe me, we're going to be talking more about this book in the coming months, right up until June. We'll make that happen. We'll be talking about topics like identity and anxiety. We're going to link up the previous conversations in the description below. We talked about fear. We've talked about joy. We've talked about, I'm sure, other amazing topics that's not coming to my head right now. Identity, the whole thing. But guys, thank you so much for sticking with us to the end. Jamie Winship, I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Guys, until next time, we'll see you.
Don't go away.